The sun had barely risen over Arlington National Cemetery, painting the sky with soft streaks of pink and gold. A cool breeze whispered through the trees, rustling the fallen leaves on the ground. Marcus, a young soldier in his mid-20s, stood perfectly still at the tomb of the unknown soldier. His uniform was spotless, his shoes polished to a shine, and every movement he made was precise, practiced hundreds of times before. He had been trained for this duty for months, learning every step of the ceremonial routine, and today, like every day, he was determined to honor the soldiers who had given everything for their country. Marcus had always taken pride in his role. To the outside world, he was just one guard among many, performing a long, quiet ritual. But to him, it was more than just a job. Standing at the tomb was a responsibility, a promise to remember those who could no longer speak for themselves. He had learned to control his mind, to focus only on the task in front of him, no matter how many people walked by, no matter the weather. Today the air was crisp and fresh, and the cemetery seemed unusually calm. Among the visitors that morning was Mr. Henry Thompson, a man whose age showed in every careful step he took. At 95, Henry had lived through history. He had fought in World War II, and now, decades later, he walked slowly through the cemetery, his cane clicking softly against the stone paths. His eyes, bright and alert despite the years, scanned the grounds with reverence. Every monument, every gravestone was a reminder of the friends he had lost, the battles he had fought, and the sacrifices that had shaped his life. As Henry approached the tomb, Marcus noticed him. The young soldier had been trained to observe, to be aware of every detail around him, and something about this man caught his attention. There was a dignity in the way Henry moved, a quiet strength that made Marcus pause for just a moment. The veteran stopped a few feet from the tomb and looked up at the soldier. He raised his hand slowly, giving a careful salute. Marcus, standing frozen in his routine, returned the salute. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried a weight neither man could ignore. Henry's lips moved as he whispered a few words, though the distance between them made it impossible for anyone else to hear. Marcus could sense the emotion behind them, a mix of pride, sadness, and memory. The old man's eyes glistened slightly, and Marcus felt something stir within him. It was not unusual for visitors to feel moved by the tomb, but there was something different about this man. This was not just respect for the unknown soldiers. This was recognition, a personal connection to history itself. Marcus continued his steps, the precise movements he had practiced so many times. He adjusted his rifle slightly, the metal cool against his gloved hand. Every turn, every pause, every step had a meaning. But now, with Henry standing there, he felt a shift. This was more than a ceremony. It was a bridge between past and present, between generations separated by decades yet united by sacrifice and service. Henry began to speak again, his voice quiet but steady. He told stories of his time in the war, memories that had been buried in his heart for decades. He spoke of fear and courage, of friends who had fallen beside him, and of moments of hope that had kept him moving forward. Marcus listened without interrupting, feeling the weight of each word. He had read about World War II, studied its history, but hearing it from someone who had lived through it was entirely different. Each sentence painted a vivid picture, and Marcus could almost see the battlefields, hear the sounds, and feel the emotions that Henry described. Time seemed to slow around them. Tourists walked past, some glancing curiously, others whispering to each other. But Marcus and Henry existed in a small bubble of understanding. Marcus could feel the veteran's hand shaking slightly, and he understood that the stories were not easy to tell. They were not just memories. They were pieces of a life shaped by courage, loss, and resilience. Marcus's heart swelled with respect. He had always admired soldiers, but this encounter made him realize just how deep that respect needed to go. Henry mentioned the names of soldiers whose lives had ended far too soon, men whose bravery had saved countless others. He spoke of a friend named James, who had saved Henry's life during a battle in France. James had never returned home, and Henry still carried the memory of him every day. Marcus adjusted his posture, feeling the gravity of the moment. Every step he took, every precise movement at the tomb, now felt even more significant. He was not just performing a ritual. He was honoring real people, real sacrifices, and a living witness to history. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light across the white marble of the tomb. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment settling into him. He had performed the same routine countless times, but today it was different. Today he understood the human side of the ceremony, the stories behind the names etched in stone, and the living veterans who carried memories too heavy to share with the world. Henry took a few more steps forward, then stopped and looked directly at Marcus. There was a recognition in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the young soldier's dedication. Marcus returned the gaze, feeling a mix of pride and humility. Here they were, two men from different eras, connected by service, sacrifice, and a shared understanding that went beyond words. Finally, Henry gave one last salute, slower this time, filled with emotion. Marcus mirrored the gesture, holding it longer than usual, knowing that this was a moment neither of them would forget. The wind carried the sounds of the cemetery around them, but for a brief time the world outside disappeared. It was just Marcus, the veteran, and the solemn duty that connected them across time. As Henry slowly walked away, leaning on his cane, Marcus felt a deep sense of honor. He resumed his steps at the tomb, more aware than ever of the generations of soldiers who had come before him. Each movement was precise, each pause meaningful. But now it was no longer just a ceremony. It was a conversation across decades, a silent promise that the sacrifices of the past would never be forgotten. Marcus continued his watch, thinking about Henry's words, the battles he had fought, and the courage he had witnessed. He realized that being a tomb guard was not just about discipline or duty. It was about respect, empathy, and carrying the stories of those who could not speak for themselves. In that quiet, golden morning, with the veteran's presence lingering in his mind, Marcus understood the true meaning of service, honor, and the human connection that could move hearts across time. After the brief but profound encounter at the tomb of the unknown soldier, Marcus felt a lingering sense of connection he could not shake. The young soldier continued his ceremonial steps with the same precision, but now every movement carried a deeper meaning. Henry's stories and the quiet dignity in his presence stayed with him, like a weight and a gift at the same time. Marcus had read about veterans in history and books, but hearing a story directly from someone who had lived through war was different. It was personal. It was real. Henry, leaning slightly on his cane, moved toward a nearby bench. Marcus watched as the old man carefully settled himself, his hands resting on his cane, eyes scanning the rows of white stones that marked the resting places of so many who had fought in battles long ago. The cemetery was quiet, filled only with the soft murmurs of other visitors, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the distant calls of birds. It was a peaceful place, yet it carried the weight of immense sacrifice and loss. Feeling compelled to honor the moment, Marcus approached Henry quietly. He did not speak at first. Instead, he walked slowly, giving the veteran space, showing respect for both the man and the stories he carried. Henry noticed him and smiled faintly, a soft recognition in his eyes. "You stand there every day," Henry said quietly, watching over them. "You don't know how much that means to people like me." Marcus nodded, unsure of how to respond. He was trained to stay stoic, but this was different. This was not about ceremony anymore. This was about human connection, about understanding the weight of history in a personal way. Henry leaned back slightly, closing his eyes for a moment as he gathered his thoughts. When he opened them again, there was a flicker of memory, as if he could see the battlefields of decades ago, hear the shouts of soldiers, and feel the fear and hope all at once. "I remember my first battle," Henry began, his voice steady but soft. "We were in France. It was cold, the kind of cold that goes right through your bones. I was scared, like every young man is. But my friend James, he kept me going. He always said, 'We fight for them, Henry. We fight so no one forgets.'" Henry's hand trembled slightly as he rested it on his cane. "James, he didn't make it back, but I remember him every day." Marcus listened, captivated. He could see the emotion in Henry's eyes, the way the old man's body carried decades of memory and grief. It was not just the story of one battle or one friend. It was a story of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice that had shaped the lives of countless people. Marcus felt a profound respect for Henry, not only for his service but for his ability to carry such memories with grace and dignity. Henry continued, speaking of the small acts of heroism that often went unnoticed. He spoke of a medic who saved dozens of lives, of a soldier who shared his rations with others despite having so little, and of the quiet moments of friendship that kept them alive in a world full of chaos. Each story was simple yet powerful, a reminder that heroism was not always in grand gestures but often in small, selfless acts. Marcus felt a connection he had never experienced before. He realized that the ceremonial steps he took at the tomb were not just about precision, they were about honor, about remembering these acts of courage and keeping them alive. Henry's words made the past come alive in a way that no book or training could. Every turn Marcus made, every pause, every careful placement of his rifle, now felt like a dialogue with history itself. The young soldier could sense that Henry wanted to share more. The veteran spoke of the friendships he had formed during the war, the moments of laughter that seemed impossible in the midst of fear, and the letters he had sent to his family, often uncertain if he would ever see them again. "We were just boys," Henry said, his voice breaking slightly. "But we learned what it meant to stand for something bigger than ourselves. We learned about courage in ways you can't imagine until you live it." Marcus was moved. He thought of his own life, his own training, and his sense of duty. Standing here with Henry, listening to him speak, Marcus felt the invisible chain that linked generations of soldiers. It was not just about serving a country, it was about protecting values, about remembering those who could no longer speak, and about carrying the stories forward so they would not be forgotten. Around them, visitors paused, sensing the quiet significance of the moment. Some whispered softly, others simply watched in respectful silence. But Marcus and Henry seemed lost in their own world. Two men from different generations connected by shared service and understanding. The young soldier felt a sense of responsibility he had never felt before. He realized that his watch at the tomb was more than a ritual. It was a promise to preserve the memory of people like Henry and the friends he had lost. Henry then spoke of the loneliness that often comes with being one of the last of his generation. "Sometimes I feel like the world has moved on," he admitted. "And the people who understand, they are fewer each year. That's why seeing you here, standing watch, it matters. It gives me hope that the sacrifices weren't in vain." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He had trained for discipline, for precision, but nothing had prepared him for the emotional weight of these words. The two men fell silent for a moment, letting the stillness of the cemetery fill the space. Marcus noticed the sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows across the marble stones. There was a sense of peace, yet it was heavy with memory. In that quiet, Marcus realized that moments like this were rare, moments where history, honor, and human connection intersected. Finally, Henry looked up at Marcus, his eyes soft but determined. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for standing here today, but for what you do every day. You honor us all." Marcus nodded, speechless but deeply moved. He returned to his ceremonial steps, more aware than ever of the significance of his duty. Every move, every pause, every turn now carried the weight of Henry's stories, of the bravery of countless soldiers, and of the deep human connection that bridged decades. As Henry slowly made his way toward the exit of the cemetery, Marcus stood a little taller, walked a little straighter, and carried the veteran's stories with him. For the first time, his role at the tomb was no longer just a duty. It was a sacred trust. He understood that each day he stood there, he was preserving not just history, but the memory of courage, friendship, and sacrifice. That morning, Marcus realized that true service was not measured in time or routine, but in respect, empathy, and the quiet moments that remind us of what truly matters. And as Henry disappeared from sight, Marcus felt a sense of purpose and connection that would stay with him for the rest of his life. After their long conversation near the tomb, Henry slowly made his way down the marble paths of Arlington National Cemetery. Marcus watched him go, feeling a mix of admiration and reflection. Even in his old age, Henry carried himself with dignity and courage, qualities that Marcus realized were not confined to soldiers in uniform. They were qualities that lived in anyone who faced life with integrity, compassion, and resilience. Marcus resumed his watch at the tomb, each step deliberate, each movement precise, but now infused with a new understanding. The morning sun shone brightly, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured grounds. Every name on the tombstones around him suddenly felt more alive, more personal. These were not just words carved into stone. They were stories, lives, and sacrifices that mattered. Marcus thought about Henry, about James and the other comrades the veteran had spoken of. He felt honored to be standing as a guardian for their memory, as though each step he took was a tribute to their courage. As he continued his watch, Marcus thought about the conversations he had shared with Henry. He remembered the way the veteran's eyes sparkled when he spoke of friendship, the slight tremble in his hands as he recalled battles, and the quiet pride in his voice when he talked about survival and sacrifice. Marcus realized that the stories of veterans were not just about the past. They were lessons for the present and the future. They taught courage, resilience, and the importance of remembering those who came before us. Later that day, Marcus wrote a letter to the local Veterans Association. He recounted his meeting with Henry and shared the veterans' stories, hoping that others could understand the depth of history and the human experiences behind the battles. Marcus wrote carefully, trying to capture the emotion and respect he felt. He wanted the words to serve as a bridge, connecting people who had lived through the past with those who were learning from it now. Writing the letter was his way of extending the impact of that morning beyond the walls of the cemetery. Marcus also reflected on his own life and service. He realized that his role as a tomb guard was not just ceremonial. It was a responsibility that carried real meaning. Standing there, he was not just honoring unknown soldiers. He was keeping their memories alive, and in doing so, he was shaping his own character. Marcus understood that true service was measured not by recognition or reward, but by dedication, respect, and the willingness to carry forward a legacy. Days passed, but the encounter with Henry remained vivid in Marcus's mind. He thought about the lessons he had learned, the importance of listening, the value of empathy, and the power of stories to connect generations. Marcus knew that he would continue to stand at the tomb with renewed purpose, knowing that every step he took was more than a routine. It was a testament to courage, sacrifice, and human connection. Weeks later, Marcus learned that Henry had passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by family. The news saddened him, but it also reinforced the significance of their encounter. Marcus felt grateful that he had had the opportunity to meet Henry, to hear his stories, and to honor his service. The young soldier realized that, in a way, Henry's legacy would live on not just through history books, but in the hearts of those who were inspired by his courage and memories. On another crisp morning, Marcus returned to his post at the tomb. The cemetery was quiet, with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant sounds of visitors walking along the paths. Marcus stood in his precise stance, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the tomb, but this time, he carried something more than discipline. He carried memory, emotion, and the stories of Henry and countless others who had served. Every movement, every pause, every step was a conversation with the past, a silent tribute to those who had given so much. As he performed the ceremonial steps, Marcus imagined Henry standing nearby, quietly watching, perhaps smiling with pride. He could almost hear the veteran's voice reminding him of courage, friendship, and sacrifice. This imagined presence strengthened Marcus's resolve, reminding him that service and honor transcended time. The young soldier felt a profound connection not only to Henry, but to every soldier whose life had been shaped by duty and sacrifice. Marcus also reflected on the impact of a single moment. A short conversation, a salute, and the sharing of stories had created a bond that neither distance nor time could break. He realized that small gestures of respect could carry immense meaning, that listening could honor the past as much as any ceremony, and that human connection was one of the most powerful ways to preserve memory. By the end of the day, Marcus had internalized a lesson he would carry for life, that the true meaning of service was not just in following orders or performing rituals, but in understanding the lives, sacrifices, and stories of those who came before. Every veteran, every fallen soldier had a story worth remembering. And standing at the tomb, Marcus knew he had a role in ensuring that those stories would never fade. Years later, Marcus would recall that morning with Henry many times, telling the story to new recruits, visitors, and anyone willing to listen. It became more than a personal memory. It became a lesson for others. He emphasized the importance of respect, listening, and honoring sacrifices, reminding everyone that history lived not just in books but in people, stories, and small, meaningful moments. The story closes with Marcus returning to his watch at the tomb one quiet morning. The wind carries the soft rustle of leaves, the sun casts a warm glow over the marble, And Marcus stands tall, every step deliberate, every gesture filled with meaning. Though Henry is no longer there, his presence lingers in the young soldier's heart, a reminder of courage, legacy, and the power of human connection. Marcus knows that as long as he stands there, the memories of the past will live on, honored with every careful step, every salute, and every moment of silent reflection.